SLAM members, I'd like to point out Ted Kramer, our president, fearless leader for so many years, is here. Cindy Lord is here. John Summers, Steve Bartlett are not here. Paul Littlefield is here. Nancy Martin, Doug McAllister, and Joanna Lucy. Joanna Lucy's here. So these are all members of SLAM. SLAM is the organization that pursued the funding for this project and has volunteered me to be the head of the steering committee for it as vice president of SLAM. The steering committee itself is made up of Bill Lord, our former select person and resident, Paul Littlefield, who is representing the planning department for the town, Joe Dame, who is on the advisory budget committee, Josh Shackford, who of course is the head of the DPW, Ralph Luchin, who is part of the Madison Conservation Committee, Bob Newton, who, if you don't know Bob, he's a longtime resident of Silver Lake and an expert in all things water and biology, and probably he knows about this stuff. And then Matt Vavro is another resident who lives on the lake. So we've got quite a group of people behind all of this. I want to recognize the select board for their support for this project, and also Linda Shackford, who's behind the scenes helping to smooth everything out as we deal with paperwork and payments. She's been fantastic to work with. And then finally, Asia is here from Mad TV, and this is being live streamed, so watch what you say. I want to introduce the company that we've chosen to work with. We screened 3 different companies who responded to our request for qualifications. And one company absolutely stood out above all the others, and it's FB Environmental. FB has done, well, as of the time we got their qualifications, they've done 42 different watershed management studies and plans just in New Hampshire alone. So they're based in Dover, and we've got an A-team helping us through this project. Couldn't be happier that these guys are available. And I want to introduce the 2 folks who are leading our team, our effort. Laura Deemer, who is you have a special title.
Certified Lake Manager.
Certified Lake Manager. She's one of only 2 in New Hampshire?
3 now. One's retiring, so I guess we're back to 2.
Back to 2. So super specialist in this whole field, and we're really thrilled to have her. And Maggie Kozalek is our project manager, who is going to keep us all on track. So with that, I'm turning the meeting over to them, and my part is done.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, and thank you all so much for having us here tonight. So we're here today to give a kickoff presentation for developing a watershed management plan for Silver Lake. And Dave, you already introduced us well, but just to kind of reiterate what our roles will be. So I am a certified lake manager. That's a national certification, and I'm a senior project manager that leads most of our lake services at FB Environmental. Maggie is going to be your day-to-day project manager, superstar. She's going to keep the wheels turning and the ship righted throughout this project, and I'm going to be here for senior level oversight. So those are going to be our roles for the project. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about who we are for a second, just so you're all aware. So FB Environmental, we are a small mission-based environmental consulting firm. This is our mission statement here. We work to restore and protect ecosystems through not only science, but community collaboration. This mission really is the driving force behind everything that we do and the projects that we pursue. So if you're interested, that's our website. You can go check out more. We do have 19 staff scientists. Maggie and I are out of the Dover office, but we also have a Portland office. We have very strong partnerships with nonprofits and academia, like through UNH, and also state and local governments, and a wide variety of skills despite our our small size, whether from field monitoring and data analysis, reporting, and community engagement and meeting facilitation. But science communication is really what we feel the strongest about. And like Dave said, we are probably the most well-known for our watershed planning work across New England, but particularly in Maine and New Hampshire. And Dave's right, we've done 42 watershed management plans in New Hampshire, 65 watershed management plans in total. So we just created this little map that shows yellow stars are the water bodies that we've completed plans for in the last couple decades. Okay, so I just kind of want to set the stage here and help us define the problem and why we're even thinking about developing a watershed management plan for Silver Lake. And then I'm going to pass it to Maggie, who's going to really talk about what is a watershed management plan, what goes into it, what you can expect over the next year and a half project timeline. So the problem is that human activities have caused a rapid degradation of surface waters, not only in our area, but across the world. The illustration you see here shows a variety of human impacts to lake ecosystems, whether it's from construction, residential, commercial development, agricultural, fertilizer use, logging, septic systems. All of those activities and land uses generate pollutants that are carried into our lakes through surface runoff and groundwater. In the lake itself, our boat wakes and shoreline development can contribute to erosion and sometimes loss of littoral habitat in those shallow areas. So we have really altered these systems in ways that make them less resilient over time. And once those pollutants are in the lakes, such as, pollutants can be an excessive amount of nutrients. They can feed cyanobacteria, algae, excessive plant growth, and we're particularly concerned about cyanobacteria growing too rapidly and forming potentially toxic blooms that is degrading water quality. So one of the most critical nutrients to aquatic growth is phosphorus. So you can think generally 10 times the amount of phosphorus comes from developed land compared to that same parcel of, say, forested land. This has really important implications for water quality. The image that you see on the left is from a classic experimental lake study that was done in Canada, where they divided the lake with a thick yellow curtain. Carbon and nitrogen were added to the top portion of the photo, and carbon and phosphorus were added to the bottom portion of the photo. So you can see that phosphorus was the limiting nutrient and spurred a massive cyanobacteria bloom. So because of this, phosphorus is going to be the primary focus of this watershed management plan. Erosion and sedimentation is one of the major ways that phosphorus can end up in surface waters. And in rural areas like what we have here in Silver Lake, soil erosion is most often comes from roads. So if they're not regularly maintained or controlled for incoming stormwater, our road shoulders, the surfaces themselves, the shoulders and the ditches can quickly erode and send large amounts of sediment carrying nutrients into surface waters. This was a watershed survey that we did 2 or 3 years ago now in the Lake Winnisquam watershed. So not too far from here, but they had a lot of road and soil erosion issues. There are a number of other threats to water quality that can come from many other sources, including septic systems, fertilizers, agricultural livestock, pet waste, waterfowl, if congregating in large groups, and usually obviously they like big grassy areas, right? Or people like to feed them, right? So we want to make sure that we're not artificially, enlarging their numbers and concentrating them in areas. And then there can be, obviously development itself, but legacy issues as well. So we look at the history of the watershed. Sometimes there's been historic sawmills or logging operations where the logs may have sunk into the lakes, or there could be old dumps or landfills. So anyway, we look at the legacy impacts as well. And then of course, on top of everything, we are in a new era with enhanced effects of climate change. So lakes are changing at a rapid pace as temperatures warm and seasonal precipitation becomes less predictable and more extreme, and making these potentially toxic cyanobacteria blooms more frequent, even in our good quality, low nutrient lakes in the region, such as Silver Lake. So climate change will continue to become more erratic and extreme. So keeping the status quo with watershed development is really no longer sustainable for our region. Our lakes are starting to hit their tipping points where they're really no longer able to assimilate these additional pollutants without a dire consequence to their ecosystems. And I just want to give an example of this. So this means that those storm events that send that phosphorus-laden sediment to our lakes, they're now getting bigger, and so they're causing bigger problems. We're seeing extreme rain events that cause flash floods. These are usually followed by drought periods like we're in right now. These photos are from a flash flood event in July of 2023 at Swansea Lake in Swansea, New Hampshire. That's on the western side of the state. A massive amount of soil and organic material was washed into Swansea Lake along with a bunch of nutrients. So in watersheds that have this moderate to steep topography, such as Swansea, and you have that here too, there's really nowhere for that water to go but downhill and into the lake during big storm events. So if these areas are developed, the water moves even more rapidly downhill, and they can easily carve out huge chunks of soil, as you can see in these photos. So this is why we're here today. We're talking about developing a watershed management plan for Silver Lake. This plan is really going to be your roadmap to understanding your water quality threats and prioritizing actions to protect your lake's water quality in the future. And as Dave said, this project was funded through a Clean Water State Revolving Fund. So it's a loan that's given to the town, but with principal forgiveness up to $100,000. So it'll just be a couple of $1,000s in interest, but it's essentially acting as a grant. And this is administered through DES. So with that, I'm going to pass to Mags, who's going to give you the rundown of what's in these plans.
Cool, thank you, Laura. We're truly so lucky to have Laura on our team. She is a leader in the field, not only in New England, but across the country. So first to orient everybody, this is the Silver Lake Watershed. So it's just over 14,000 acres or 22 square miles. It's mostly in the town of Madison here, but there are very small parts in Tamworth and Freedom and pretty much negligible parts in Albany and Eaton. So the boundaries of a watershed are defined by geography. The edges are determined by the high points. So if a drop of water lands inside the boundary, it will eventually flow towards Silver Lake. And if it falls just outside the boundary, it'll flow towards some other water body in a different watershed. Sometimes these natural boundaries are altered a little bit by humans, and whether that's land development or sometimes stormwater infrastructure will take water from outside in a different watershed and take it into this watershed. So the watershed planning cycle really is a cycle. So first we'll build public support. This public kickoff meeting is the start to that. Next, we'll identify the major sources of phosphorus through modeling and field surveys. We'll look at what are the major water quality issues and what's driving those issues, as Laura has explained. Next, we'll work with the committee that Dave introduced to set up a water quality goal, and that'll work towards improving the water quality, or kind of in the case of Silver Lake, more preventative measures because you have such great water quality already. Next, we'll prioritize actions to reduce any identified sources of phosphorus to meet our water quality goal. And then we'll implement the watershed plan and evaluate it throughout the implementation. And these plans are revisited every 10 years to do kind of a redo or re-up based on what has changed so far. So now I want to go into each of these aspects a little bit more. Oops, didn't click through. There you go. So first, arguably the most important step is to build public support. This is one step that extends far before this project itself and far past this project. So Dave and the Silver Lake Association of Madison have already worked really hard to gather a lot of public support and awareness for keeping Silver Lake healthy, and you've done a great job. And so particularly in this project, this step will include public education through outreach events. Like I said, this is one of them. And then also some more public events to come down the line and other resources that we'll make through the project. And then also through the convening of the steering committee. So Dave already introduced them, and this is a small focus group that will be used to guide some more technical work. So both the public and the steering committee are really critical to this process. You are all the ones who live, work, recreate here, and you know the watershed the best, more than we could ever. So we're really going to tap into your local knowledge here to understand what the issues are, where you have areas of concern, and how you use your land. The next step is to complete field surveys. So this includes a watershed survey and a shoreline survey. And as Laura explained, the focus for both of these is to identify the major sources of phosphorus, and typically we'll be looking at erosion for that. So for the watershed survey, we'll have 4 of our technical staff and 2 teams go out and drive every single accessible road in the watershed, and we'll look for these sources of nutrients like erosion typically. And we'll try to meet with some key landowners like camp directors or also DPW staff to understand the practices that they already use. Then for the shoreline survey, we'll also have 4 technical staff go out, and we'll be in 2 boats with some volunteer boat drivers, and we'll look at every single one of the lake's 204 parcels, and we'll assess them for different factors such as vegetated buffer, erosion, and exposed sediment to understand which parcels may be contributing more phosphorus than others. So these parcels right on the lake are the most important because they are the closest to the water, and so any sort of contributions that they have will reach the water faster than, say, a parcel way up high in the watershed. Next, we'll analyze the available water quality data. So this includes data that has already been collected and data that we will be collecting during this project. So Silver Lake is a part of the UNH Lakes Lay monitoring program. So there's volunteers who are already taking a lot of data over the past many years. So we'll look at that data as well as data from DES. And so under this project, we're also conducting plankton net tows, which we actually have one next to Laura. We brought for a little show and tell.
We did. It was an add-on that we added to the project because we had a little leftover funds. So we don't have the coupler here, but this is a plankton net for anyone who maybe hasn't seen one. We thought we'd do a little show and tell. So this is just an example. This might not be the one that we use for the project, but we're open to get some assistance from volunteers and obviously the LLMP folks to take monthly plankton tows. So this is lowered down into the water column at the deep spot in your lake. And once we get it to the depth we want, which usually we're trying to get the majority of the water column, maybe a few feet off the bottom, we would lower it down and then slowly lower it up. And this is a fine mesh that you see here. This particular mesh size is 80 microns. So it filters the water down through, and there's a coupler that screws onto the bottom here, and it'll concentrate the small microorganisms that we want to take a closer look at. So we're particularly interested in the phytoplankton, or the algae, and the zooplankton, which is the critters that like to eat the algae, the phytoplankton. So we want to understand that community. You guys do have some data for that, but it's largely been a little bit sparser and something that maybe DES biologists have done in the past for trophic surveys. So we wanted to maybe capture a full season to understand just the community dynamics, right? And whether it follows maybe the typical patterns that we like to see. You know, usually we've got like diatoms and golden browns starting off in the beginning of the season, and then that'll crash because all of a sudden the zooplankton will be, you know, feeding off all of that, and their populations will spike. And then towards the end of the season, you might get more green. So we really want to try and see those dynamics and help describe your lake ecosystem more than we know now. So,
Thanks. So once we have all this data, we'll calculate how much nutrients the water body can take on without impairing water quality. So we'll also model nutrient load to the lake. This will tell us which areas in the watershed contribute the most nutrients. And as a part of this, we model for current, past, and future scenarios to help us inform the water quality goal and target different remediation efforts. So in order to model for future conditions, we run a build-out analysis. This is an example of one in a different watershed in New Hampshire. So this tells us the number of new homes that could be built in the watershed based on certain environmental conditions like steep slopes and protected wetlands and existing buildings and current zoning regulations. So we use all of that information that we've gathered to inform the development of a water quality goal. So this goal will be based on that modeling, and we'll set achievable targets for nutrient loading reduction so that we can ensure that Silver Lake is protected from impairment. So after the water quality goal is created, we'll develop an action plan. So this will be a menu of options that Silver Lake can pick from and your whole team can choose from to implement, and it'll help you work towards your water quality goal. So for each item, we'll identify responsible parties to accomplish that. We'll identify the cost to implement it, suggest potential funding sources for it, and set a schedule of implementation. So this will be incorporated into the final plan, which has all the pieces that I just discussed. Another recommendation is to apply for grants. We'll have a full list of potential grants that you can apply for to fund this action plan. Some federal funding does require a watershed management plan to be in place, so you will be eligible for that after this. That's like 319 funding. And then there are other avenues of federal and state funding. So through this process, you're going to gain a detailed understanding of the water quality of Silver Lake as it pertains to various water quality parameters. You'll get a roadmap of areas in your watershed that contribute more or less amounts of pollutants, with certain areas that will prioritize for remediation. You'll get an understanding of how the watershed and water quality has changed over time and will change in the future. You'll get tangible goals with many actions that your community can take to reach your goals. And you'll get access to future funding with the recommendations that we make. So, like I said before, these watershed plans are done for 10-year cycles, and they make you eligible for federal funding. So after 10 years, you'll reevaluate your watershed and what has changed to see what new actions you need to do. So that's all I have for you. We want to open it up to questions now. Yeah, go ahead.
Russ Malloy here. I live in Madison, barely. Walk across the driveway and be in Conway. How many of you are familiar with the watershed plan that we have done for Big Pea Marsh Pond? That's what I thought. Mindy was part of that, and we have that watershed plan. That started some time ago. We have the problem of Rockhouse Mountain draining right down into Big Pea Barge, and if any of you have ever seen a picture of the plume that occurs in Big Pea Barge after a heavy storm, it wakes people up and says, yeah, there's a problem. One of the questions I have is when we did this with Big Pea Barge, I presented a workshop at Tin Mountain on road maintenance. I happen to have been taking care of most of the driveways on the steep driveways on the East Shore Drive side of the pond. Bob Newton's included, and that was one of the most complicated ones that I've ever been involved with. And I'd be happy to do a workshop and a field visit to something like that, because there were several things I employed there that can be incorporated. I've got other driveway customers here, a couple right here. So I'd be happy to do that for you. That was part of our program, part of the outreach for FB for the program here. So I'd be happy to do that. The Big P does drain into Silver Lake eventually, doesn't it?
I don't believe it does actually, from our, I can go back to the,
Spanfield Brook.
I wish I could go back easier than this. Oh.
So if anybody wants to see a copy of that watershed plan, we can email it, or
Yeah.
maybe get a copy down here to the library or something.
That's up further in Conway.
Yeah, the Big P Porch Pond isn't part of this watershed. But thank you. And wait, can I get your name one more time?
Pardon?
Can I get your name?
Can you get my name?
Yeah.
Or do you have to? Russ Lanoy, L-A-N-O-I-E.
Thank you. We'll definitely be in touch. Yeah, so, any questions that you have on what we presented, feel free. This is kind of an open discussion, Q&A. But I also want you to think about, too, this is, these kickoff meetings are really important for us because it helps set the tone, right, and set the direction for this project. So if you have specific concerns about the lake, about, the known area draining to the lake, this is the time where we would really like to start getting that feedback. And of course, we'll get more feedback throughout the process and from the steering committee, but this really helps to get a lot of those up front. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Ted Crowman. I'm just curious, so Silver Lake is mostly privately owned residential properties on it. So can you give like an example of how the public funding, like grants that you can get, can go towards the solutions? Like if you determine, one part of the watershed is polluting more than others, and you have residential properties on that, parcels on that area, how, like, I'm just thinking like last year I replaced my septic. It was accessible before, so it was probably polluting a lot, and I upgraded it, and I think it's all good now, but just as an example, how would you help someone or encourage someone or give grants to help a private resident get this funding?
Yeah, so the state and federal grants that are available can be on private land.
Okay.
You as a private resident or landowner are not necessarily eligible to apply for those grants, but what happens during these surveys is we identify those areas, whether public, private, whatever, and then you can work with, like SLAM would be eligible, the town obviously, any other nonprofit groups that you want to work with can apply for those grants and do work on private property, including septic systems, and
That's
which
great.
is actually kind of a unique thing for New Hampshire. This is not something that all states offer, but in the state of New Hampshire, you can apply for implementation funding, and we've seen projects where they'll, request funding for maybe 10 septic system evaluations and just maybe cover the cost completely. And then
Sure.
another, another set aside to maybe some level of assistance. Usually it has to be a cost share, right, so that the landowner has some skin in the game, but usually it's at least a 50-50 cost share, if not a little bit more covered through the grant. And maybe that funds 2 septic system replacements, assuming you find a couple out of those, 10 that you evaluate. So yeah, it's not limited, but the private landowner might not be able to directly go for those funds, but when you work through this process and you have nonprofits or towns, you can go kind of circumvent and get that eligibility.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I'm Ted Chapman, just to follow on to what Ted just said. The grants that you just showed through this life cycle of this project, the grants potential came at the end. So does this whole thing have to complete before we become eligible for some of the grants that you just described?
Yeah, so ideally you would want to have a final watershed management plan before you go after these funds, but that's not necessarily the case. So You could have a partially completed plan with the intent that it will be finalized, right, within like a few months, say, of you going after funding. So unfortunately, right now, in the climate we have and the budgeting at the federal level, funding for this fall cycle is paused right now, with the hope that it will be reinstated. So you'd be more eligible for this time next year, assuming the project, the funding source is still there. And we wouldn't necessarily, it'd only be a year from now, so we wouldn't necessarily have a final watershed plan in place, but you'd be far enough along that you could have conversations with DES in the summer, and we could have a pre-application in September. Okay, sorry.
It sounds like the phosphorus is a really loud mouth line that you get immediate results for everyone, which helps everyone. We also have in Madison a recent finding by the EPA that there was a hazardous waste site from the old lead mine. And that that's right on Cook Pond, which empties directly into Silver Lake. Will you explore other avenues of issue besides just the phosphorus?
Yeah, so we want this watershed management plan to highlight, the known or, issues. So if there's a known issue of lead in one of the ponds, we'll at least try to work with you and DES to maybe extract some of that history and at least summarize it in the plan. And maybe have an action item or two in the plan to say, whether there's some follow-up monitoring, like maybe, a recommendation would be to collect some sediment cores to understand what the lead levels are, right? And whether any action is needed. But beyond that, like the water quality goal and all of that and the modeling will be focused on the phosphorus. But we do want information like that, like any pollutants, but it'll be more in summary form.
Even work with the EPA to facilitate a solution to that problem before, even though it's an ongoing problem.
Yeah, as part of this like planning process, we can at least make an initial outreach to get more information, put it, on the radar, just open up that discussion. But any further follow-up would have to be like a next step with implementation. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Donovan. Thank you for being here. Are you folks familiar with Green Mountain Conservation Group?
Oh, yes.
They have a lot of data for you.
Yes,
I'm
they do.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so we wrote the Ossipee Lake watershed management plans. We actually had to have two. And so obviously Silver Lake is part of that. And so we have all that historic data, and all of that data should also be with DES in their database. So we should have access to all that, but we'll definitely be looping in Green Mountain on this. Yeah, sorry, I know that.
That's okay. Bill Lord, two points on a question. When Dave and I initially wrote the application to DES, we included lead line and we included the effluent from the chick mill lumber because there was so much sawdust that went in the lake. So Mike, we included that part also. Ted, there is money available through the National Resource Conservation Service to private owners. There's some bureaucracy that you got to do with USDA to get into NRCS. But to get money for riparian buffer and planting stuff and stream management, and I can explain that later how you get NRCS money for your property. My question was, one of the things we wrote into our application and you didn't talk about, and it's probably down in the weeds, but could potentially be important long-term, is the review of our zoning and planning rules, so that as we come up with something that says, hey, you can only support X amount of building, how do we translate that into rules that can get applied by zoning enforcement dudes, selectmen, to ensure that somebody just doesn't throw this thing away. We've codified those rules, and so I think part of what we included in there was a review of our rules to ensure that we can enforce some of the things that we come up with. And was that part of
Yes, absolutely. So apologies for not directly mentioning that, but we do a municipal ordinance review as part of this project. And
I knew the answer, I wanted them to hear it.
yeah, we actually have a whole section in the action plan that's just for municipal planning, and we'll provide recommendations of where we feel there's like some weaknesses or areas of improvement in zoning. And that's also, we did highlight the build out analysis. That is such a great tool just because it's so visual. And so when you have districts that have, you know, half acre or acre lots, and suddenly those new homes are just this major cluster, right? And then we can model that as a future scenario to understand, okay, if your watershed was fully built out to the maximum conditions that are currently allowable by your ordinances, how is that going to affect water quality? And that is very helpful in understanding, like, whoa, that's where we could be, right? So let's not get there. Let's find some middle ground here where we can still support development, but in a sustainable way that also protects your water quality, your tax base, right? The whole thing. So
Pretty difficult to avoid a building lot.
yeah.
To follow up, Bob Murphy, to follow up on that, I think you mentioned there are 204 lakefront properties, not parcels, not properties, parcels
Yep.
around the lake.
Yes.
Can you tell me how many of those have homes on them and how many of them are potential to be built on?
Yeah.
We haven't analyzed that yet. That will be part of the shoreline survey. So as part of that, we take data for which parcels do have buildings on them. So that'll come in about a month or so. And then also with the build out analysis, that'll analyze which ones can be built on.
Oh, and septic database.
Oh, and we will be taking creating a septic system database. So that'll tell us how many shorefront parcels within 300 feet, I believe, of the shoreline have septic systems on them.
Yeah.
Following up on Bill's comment, the new engineer for the NRCS happens to be a Madison resident. He lives right on, right across from Webb's, right? I think he's in the district of Idlewild, so there's a resource we've got right here.
Perfect.
He's
Great.
young and he's eager. I've been working with him.
Oh, great. Do you know what's his name?
Alex
Alex.
Meyer.
Okay, great.
He's from New Jersey, but we won't hold that against him.
Did you have a question here?
I just was wondering what kind of actions will be taken to homeowners? I mean, you just provide the information and suggest they do this, this, and this? Or you can only suggest, there's no,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
you can't
So.
make somebody put buffers and roars and everything on.
That's why they give them money.
Give who money?
Yeah, so we'll, you know, there'll be, you know, there's a lot of actions that landowners can take, and we'll be providing resources for private landowners to, you know, understand what they can do on an individual, you know, property basis, whether it's stormwater runoff control, septic system maintenance or replacement, and then just being conscious of like the chemicals or fertilizers, or hopefully, you know, you're not really using that. You know, as far as the grants, right, they'll be available to private landowners. We really encourage using LakeSmart first. So New Hampshire Lakes would be your primary entity to go through, and they can send a knowledgeable technical person to go and evaluate your property and do a site walk with you. And they're so good, and they're so kind about it too, right? Because the whole point is, right, to find things to improve, and they really do an amazing job working with landowners. But then obviously it's up to the landowner to then hopefully make those improvements, and New Hampshire Lakes can come back, and if those improvements were made, then you can have like a little plaque, right, that says LakeSmart certified, with the hope that it's kind of a neighbor to neighbor peer pressure thing of like, oh, you know, I want a plaque now.
We have 15 so far.
Oh, great, that's wonderful, yeah. But the grants can help with those technical assistance visits as well. And we have worked on projects like that where, say, we budget to visit 10 properties over like a 2-year grant cycle. And we make sure that those improvements are made on the property. But again, it still comes down to the individual property owner, and we might, you know, I've had projects where, yes, we visited 10 properties and they all seemed on board, but you know, a year and a half, 2 years later, when the project is closing, maybe 7 or 8 actually ended up doing the work, right? So it's always a challenge, but I also like to look at it from even just an education outreach perspective. So even if nothing happened, at least we had a discussion, at least we were kind of opening that dialogue for greater awareness and understanding, and that's like the first step.
And there are certain scenarios in which you can force a resident to do something, and that'll come through ordinances. So if you do end up making a septic system inspection ordinance, that means homeowners are required to get their septic system inspected. So that's the sort of like forced route, but yes, most of it is through outreach and education. Did you want to add on?
Yeah, I want to add to this, because what this is all about is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, is so we identify these issues, and let's say many of them, which the ones we're talking about now, are personal. You know, they're on private property. What do we do about it? There's like 3 avenues. That we've touched on one, which is peer pressure. And that can work with time. The more of us that do the Lake Smart program, the more people understand that this is important. Over time, that will have an effect. The other one is the Shoreline Protection Act. We do have laws in New Hampshire of what you can and cannot do on your shoreline property. And we recently had somebody come to us at SLAM and say, hey, I'm worried about what's going on over here with this property. What about it? Our role is to help educate that person who's concerned about it on what the Shoreline Protection Act includes, and then point them, if they think that there's a violation, to the form that they can fill out to notify DES that they have a complaint. And then the third thing that I point out are local and state ordinances. The local ordinances are ones that we're going to be identifying here, and the heavy lifting is going to happen at the end of this project when this team has identified for us what we need to do. Then we're going to have to get our act together, and we're going to have to convince the town to make the changes that need to be made to actually protect the lake. The other thing is SLAM sends out an advocacy alert through the legislative period whenever there is something going on at the state level that is in our favor or not in our favor, something we want to fight against. If you haven't seen those, sign up for our newsletter on the SLAM website. We send out advocacy alerts generally in the period from January to June, because that's when the legislation gets together, the Congress or our state gets together, and that's when there's things that we can reach out to our legislators and tell them, we really think you should vote in favor or against this. And those are things we can do. That's what's at our disposal.
Hi, Electronic again. Just a clarification. You indicated that you will be studying all roads that kind of abut the lake.
Yes,
Yeah.
all roads that we can access.
Yeah.
All roads
So,
accessible in this photo here, yeah.
Would that, would Lead Mine Road, which abuts the inlet that goes to the lake, be part of that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it's in the watershed and it's not posted, no
Pardon
trespassing.
me?
If it's in the watershed and it's not posted as no trespassing, then
Okay.
we'll be driving it.
So you're gonna do the whole watershed, not just the roads around the lake?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Can I ask you, are you planning to go on the individual properties or contact the homeowners that are on the lake itself to see where the septic is or whatever? Is that one of the plans to do
So,
that, or-
no, we're not going to be going on any private property unless it's identified ahead of time. So that's where, like, this group and the committee will be having a couple discussions before we do field surveys later this fall to identify maybe there is a particular private property that several people are aware of that's an issue. Then we'll have a list of people that we know we want to contact ahead of time to get permission, hopefully even better to meet with that landowner on site, walk their property and have a discussion. And like Mag said, we'll definitely be reaching out to the DPW staff, because that time is golden for us. Usually we just hop in their truck and one of our staff, and they'll just drive the roads and they'll point out all the issues, and we write them up and we document it, and it's, you know, more information that we could ever glean from ourselves, right, just going out one day. So.
And then the other question, if we can have access as you go on, is there a website, or either through SLAM, or how this is progressing and what you're finding out? Like, is there going to be some kind of...
Yeah, so I guess that's up to SLAM. Our primary communication will be with SLAM and the town through the steering committee. We, you know, any summaries that are broadcast beyond that, I guess, will be up to you guys.
It might be decided later on, but I just was wondering if, like, we would have access to, you know, how things are progressing and what's going on, sort of thing, the data or whatever.
We want to keep this super transparent and public so that people can not only consume it and learn from it, but also contribute to it. As you're seeing here, this is great dialogue. Mm-hmm. And so the plan will be to use the SLAM website for sure to provide updates. We also have 400 email addresses that we send regular updates to, and we'll use that for this purpose. And then there are 2 or 3 more public meetings.
Yes, we'll have
2 to 3. Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but
yeah,
at least
so
1 to 2.
There's a few more forums like this, and if there's other ideas or other ways, you know, of getting the word out, we're open to it.
Then there were, Dave, you and I talked about the opportunities to go in front of the Board of Selectmen occasionally at the BOS and update them, which of course would be broadcast, and you could find out some current updates in that method too.
So is this slide presentation already on SLAM, or is it going to be on SLAM?
it will be.
Will be,
If you'd
yeah.
like to post it.
Yeah, no, it's not there now.
Thanks.
Just, that is the watershed in that that involves many towns. Are you going to be able to work in conjunction with other towns in identifying problems that lead to the watershed that goes into Silver Lake?
Yes.
I don't know why Conway's not on there.
So there is just a little bit, you can see Tamworth here is just a little small bit of road here in the watershed. Freedom is really just conserved land down here. We'll of course still take a look at it. Looks like a road goes right down to there, so we'll be taking a look, but Albany is just up there. You can barely see the dotted line, so there's really not any, and the same for Eaton over there. And then none of the watershed is in Conway.
So
In the middle, is that Purity Pond with the green around it? Does anybody know? That's what it looks like to me, and the chain of,
This one?
that one.
It's Durgan Pond.
Thank you.
No.
yeah, so you can see that the majority of the watershed is in Madison. So, you know, I think we could maybe talk to Tamworth, assuming that little stretch of road is probably a town road. You know, we could reach out to the Tamworth DPW just to see what they're doing there. But yeah, the majority of the watershed is Madison, so I guess.
Yeah, Coleman's up there. Is Coleman up there?
I'm not sure. We don't have them labeled in here. I would have to look at a,
Yeah, sorry, I'm not familiar with that one.
sorry.
We will become familiar.
Yes, we will, soon enough.
I don't think so.
There is a Purity Pond, there is another small conservancy area for Audubon that's missing.
Okay, that's good to know.
Can I have that?
Around Purity Pond, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of obviously this is just a conservation file from Granite, and they often are a bit outdated. So if you see any bigger ones,
Do you know about Chicarba Lake? What do we know about Chicarba Lake? I mean, I can look it up, but its health conditions, that's something that people in Tamworth talk about all the time, using that pond.
Socorro Lake, I don't believe is in the watershed. It's not in this, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
is it-
It's over, I believe it's
Tamworth.
Tamworth,
Okay,
right? So
all
it's
right,
over
thank you.
this
Thank
way, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you're aware or not, but there is a PFAS problem here in the center of town. The library, the town hall, and the fire station all have PFAS in their wells, and around this area, there's other wells that have PFAS in it.
oh, is that why there's a "Do not drink the water" sign in the bathroom? That's good,
So,
that's good to know,
is
yeah.
I don't know if that's gonna play into what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that's water quality, so we'll at least have a summary of it, especially since obviously it seems to be an issue right here in town.
17 miles.
17?
A lot of work to do.
Yeah, so obviously we'll rely on like your local knowledge, right, on all this, but we also, through the one-stop DES, you know, we can pull historic data and permits from, you know, hazardous waste sites or remediation sites. We can kind of get a sense of what's happened in the past, right? And we do have a section where we summarize kind of these other contamination historic issues. And then we might bring that up at a committee
Happy
meeting.
to share the information on Coast Pond if you
Great.
like. At
Yes.
the mine site.
Yes, please, if there's any reports or correspondence or whatever that you feel would be helpful for us, you know, please send it direct to us or Dave and he can give it to us.
Yeah, just on the topic of Cook's Pond, we actually have core samples that were done by Bob Newton. So we do have a fair amount of information about it that we will be sharing.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, EPA and DES are working together and they have some information. for you.
Okay, great.
Did you have a question back there? Yeah.
No, just, may have missed it. Can you tell us how long you expect this whole cycle to take until we get the final report?
Yeah, it usually takes around 18 months, so
18
we'll
months.
plan to be done around December time of next year.
So will any of the studies be done in the balance of this season?
So we'll be doing the watershed survey and the shoreline survey this season. The water quality sampling with the net will happen next season so that we can get more of a span of the summer since we didn't start till later this summer. So now into next season will be the data collection period.
So summer residents leaving in the next, who knows, week, month, whatever, will you try to get out quicker? Does it matter to see while the docks are in versus when they come out?
I think you scheduled it. Right?
We scheduled it for before the lake lowers.
Yeah, it's
I know
scheduled
that
for the
much.
29th of
Too
September.
late.
Our dam has a
I mean-
leak and we haven't had any water in a long time. I don't know, it's down at least 6 inches, maybe more.
But it's not required that homeowners are there while we do the survey, so it should be okay. Any other areas of concern in the watershed? Any other questions that folks have?
We look forward to the updates. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. Well, Dave has my email that he can share out on the website or wherever that folks can send me an email with anything or send it to him and he can get it to me. So always an open line of communication between you and us. You're the reason that we're doing this and you're gonna be the most helpful to us. So we're really excited to work with you.
And again, your names?
Maggie is my name. I can go back to the beginning.
And what happens on September 29th? Is that
September
when you're-
29th, the Dorothy Ann, our pontoon boat, of 21 years, will take a couple of these wonderful folks very slowly down the lake. And they'll be taking all kinds of notes and I'll be making
So
sure.
you
we
want
don't-
coffee
we don't go.
and blueberry?
That'd be lovely. I was thinking we could take a couple of the Silver Lake Singers with us.
Great.
Yeah?
That is a good thing to note though, is that when we do the shoreline survey, we will be taking a photo of everybody's parcel. So maybe spread the word to your friends because sometimes people are really off-put that we're taking photos of their land. But usually they're fine once we tell them why, but just so you have a heads up there.
And we are sensitive to that, you know, private information, right? The photo cataloging. We keep that internal to us, and we would give the information to SLAM at their request. But as far as, because a lot of times we'll make a map that highlights parcels by like a rating, right? We try to not make those documents public because we don't want people to find their parcel and it's bright red and then they get really upset. It's really it's like an education outreach tool. It's a way for us to prioritize, to assess the parcels and say, okay, these top 10 properties, they could use a little help, right? And that's like internal information that SLAM and the town can use to then go help and see if those landowners are like willing to have a technical site visit or not. But we try to keep that sensitive information under wraps.
So you wouldn't recommend that we announce those properties at the Silver Lake Boating Club party?
It's entirely up to you.
It could be very effective.
If you don't get an invitation to the party, that may tell you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you.